It's a
I had to
hamburger
look
man.
up my Twitter name.
I could have told you. I could have told you that.
You all, I think we might be live.
We are live.
Oh, we're live.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. I wasn't ready for that.
No.
Okay. Welcome everybody to. I hear myself.
Do you have another tab open somewhere?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Dang, sorry for that. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm Heather from the desktop team, bringing another Indaba to you all. Just a reminder, they're the last Friday of every month. So thank you for joining us. And we have a bunch of questions that you all submitted, which we really appreciate. But you can also submit questions as we're going in the YouTube or the Twitch live stream chat there. And we will get them answered. So let's get started. So I said I'm Heather. We have Monica, Ken, and Martin is joining us as a guest from the community. So let's go around the room, introduce yourselves. Monica, do you want to start?
Hello. So we had a lot of fun yesterday at our community office hours. And if you are on either our YouTube or Twitch channels, you can go to our video on demand and you'll see the most recent one. We got to chat with some winners of a recent community wallpaper competition on the Ubuntu Hideout Discord. And we announced the Impish Indri wallpaper competition for Ubuntu. And so if my awesome counterpart behind the scenes can maybe post that link, you can go to the discourse post, see the rules. It's super, super, super similar to the EO and Ermin, which I feel EO and Ermin, Heather should really show off her awesome shirt. And that is
like
from
hiding.
Ubuntu France from their website. Yeah, that's an amazing shirt. So see the discourse post. You'll see the rules. You'll see the winners for the last competition. There's already submissions, which is fantastic. You have until August 20th to get those in, and then the community will vote on the top 10, and then 2 of those will go into the desktop image, which is exciting. And I feel if we're going to be repping our awesome Ubuntu shirts, I think our guests will appreciate this one. Custom made. So, yes. And it's just
Gold
the
star,
first
Monica.
person.
Gold star.
The first person I see in the wild who understands this reference, just all the
Give them a
nerd.
hug.
Seriously, just I'll ask their vaccination status and then big hug. So
just mask off, just hug. It doesn't matter. There's no vaccine.
I went with an alternative. I went with a Debian based T-shirt. There we go.
I love that. That's awesome. So that's what has been going on in the community. Reese did a really great chat last week with Young Ben Han and some of the organizers of the UbuCon Asia. And he talked with them about the Ubuntu Korea community and what they've been doing. So definitely, if you haven't been tuning into the office hours, they're kind of like this, but super casual, broadly community focused. It's a fun time.
Yeah, I really like the work that you guys are doing to like bring together all of those communities. And I'm really excited to see how many like wallpaper submissions, because I looked at the EON Ermine one and there was 186 submissions or something. So we already have kind of a bunch and we have like a month and a half to go. So
we do. I'm also hoping there was a throwaway comment at the end of the OMG Ubuntu article about the competition, about, you can do photography, you can do like raster art or vector art, and he said you could do macaroni. It's like, if you're the macaroni art kind of person, this might not be for you. And I'm like, we could make macaroni art based wallpaper.
There's even been some Blender submissions.
I saw that. That was so. I'm looking forward to maybe some Blender created injuries. That could be very cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff. So
Yep.
I'm excited to see what happens there. So continuing around the room, Ken, who are you? What do you do?
Ken Van Dyne. I lead the desktop team, and I have been working on the desktop team for 12 years now. Just coming back off vacation, so my head's a little foggy still. Getting back into the work mode, but this is never work. This is good stuff.
Yeah, Ken is our fearless leader. That is the nicest. And Martin, what are you doing these days?
So I'm the lead for the community project Ubuntu Mate, and I think we're going to touch on that a little bit today.
Yeah, definitely.
Nah.
Yeah. Although somebody in the audience wants us to know. Yeah, okay, great. And then, like as Monica mentioned, we have Reese in the background kind of helping us get those questions together all in one place, make sure that we get them answered. So with that, let's kind of get to some of the questions that were submitted. Let's start off talking about QA. So there was a really good question that was submitted by, I think it's pronounced Merlin. Sorry if that is incorrect. But Merlin pointed out that Ubuntu has a rigorous QA process to make sure that stable releases don't have new bugs. We have this whole stable release update process to do that. But we don't necessarily have such a rigorous process for snaps. So the question is, given the recent, how does the QA for desktop snaps differ from the regular kind of SRU process? And given the recent reboot of Snapcrafters, they've been discussing how to make sure snaps are well tested. So any sort of inspirational quips we could hand over to advice that would be useful.
Yeah, I'll take that. So what he's really bringing up here is there was an incident a couple weeks ago where the Snap Store, there was a version published that stopped working. And this is we really don't have as rigorous of testing for our snaps. We do quite a bit of manual testing, and we have some automated testing where we get emailed screenshots several times a day from a bunch of different distros the snaps running on, so we can verify they've started, the themes look correct, that kind of thing. But we had an incident where the platform snap had a symbol dropped, and it only seemed to affect the Snap Store. And it wasn't the Snap Store snap that changed. It was a content snap. So we don't have this concept of a reverse depends because we don't really use the dependency term in snaps. So that wasn't caught. And then we had to do a rebuild of the Snap Store to fix it. And in that rebuild, introduced another problem. And that was really dependent on, it was rebuilt with a version of Snapcraft that had an issue, a typo in an environment variable. And that wasn't caught. It was a little bit more obscure. So we are working on improving our testing story. We have a fair bit of automation already, and we're working with our certification lab to improve that and expand. I am very interested in, I'm also a Snapcrafter, and I am very interested in kind of sharing as much of the infrastructure we'll have for automated testing between the desktop snaps and Snapcrafter snaps, to help bring in some of the community maintained snaps into that fold to make sure they're of high quality. So I want to make that available. We're trying to work that out right now, how that's going to work. But we're working on improving that process and making it a little bit more rigorous, more like the SRU process, to get things released.
Yeah, I think that sounds really cool. I was pretty impressed when I started getting those emails that had the screenshots of the snaps kind of automatically generated. So there is some QA testing.
And let me also mention that some of the stuff that they're working on too, people bring up performance pretty often in snaps, and I think performance is pretty good now. We've really fixed a lot of the bigger issues, the lower hanging fruit, but we definitely don't want that to regress. So now we have these automated tests are collecting metrics on startup times of snaps. Not just the total startup time, but various stages of that startup time, so we can start to see where, there was a change in font config that might have introduced a slower first, cold start time, that kind of thing. And we're tracking that internally. So we will see if there's regressions and be able to kind of stop the line and go back and fix things if we start to see problems. And we're going to continue to expand that as well. And I'd like to be collecting those same metrics for Snapcrafter snaps as well.
And by making those improvements, that affects not just desktop snaps, right? Like that affects even the server snaps that could improve.
Right. And it could highlight when there's a problem, like a regression rolls out in Snapd. We'll detect that quickly because we have all this automated testing in place. So we're still expanding that, and definitely interested in any feedback. People have suggestions, but for Merlin in particular, I'll make sure that we talk about that soon with the Snapcrafters, so we can kind of get in sync to make sure we can leverage the same tools.
Yeah, I think that's exciting, and I'm excited about all of the new Snapcrafter kind of efforts there. I think you guys are going to see a lot more people kind of joining too for it. Great. Okay. Merlin also had a question that was really good about the printing stack. So I reached out to our printing guy, and he. So this is Till. So Till is our cups open printing stack master. I don't know, guru.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Of course.
I think it's fair to say that Till is not Canonical's printing guy.
That's true.
Till
Linux's.
is the not just
The
the Linux guy. He is the printing guy. There's only two people that care about printing in the world on Unix-like operating systems, and Till represents 50% of that, and he works at Canonical.
That's a really good point. Yeah, he knows everything about printing. It's really great.
And is just so passionate about it too.
Oh, yes.
It's really great.
We can talk for hours on printing. So back to that. So the question, this is why we're here, is Ubuntu Desktop planning on switching the printer stack to the cup snap? And that was a really good question. And if yes, when? And we're working on the when, so we don't want to promise anything too soon there. But Till said that we're working towards providing cups as a snap by default without a solid target release. We're doing it as fast as we can, right? That's the release goal. What still needs to be done is that there's some Snapd cups interface that still needs to be implemented. So there's an open PR. There's more discussion happening on the Snapcraft forum. And for the cups interface, the mentioned PR needs, I see, yeah. So there's a Snapd PR that's currently open to get this cups interface. And then there will be another PR to make that work nicely and easy in Snapcraft. So there's still a little bit of work to do, but it sounds like it's coming along nicely. And we'll let you know when that will be released. And then we'll also have Till come and be a guest on that Indaba and have him answer all of your printing questions.
And let me expand on that a little bit.
Okay.
Ideally, I would love it if we switched to the cup snap by default in 2110, but I don't really want to commit to that yet because there's still some moving pieces, and some of the changes we need to land into Snapd can take a little bit of time, and I don't want to be, a week before feature freeze and panicking that we don't have it in yet. We will do it when it's ready, and we don't want to regress. We want the quality to be there. We want to know it's going to be a complete replacement for the current model. But there's a number of things that this is going to bring. Not only will cups be maintained as a snap then, and we could have, parallel support for devices across all releases of Ubuntu that ship that, right? Not just you have to have X version of Ubuntu for it to work. It'll work on any version of Ubuntu that has the cup snap. But we're also going to be shipping, or you'll be able to install your printer and scanner drivers as snaps as well. So you can get those basically directly from the hardware manufacturer, the drivers. So you don't have to worry about, oh, my printer requires a binary blob, I got to drop it in some directory to make it work. You'll be able to just magically print with everything. So, and that's really what we're working towards right now. We want that complete story there. And once that's in place, we will switch to it. I am hopeful that it will be 2110.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of 2110, there was a question that flew by asking when we would get GNOME 40, and that 2110. But
yeah. Can I take that?
Yeah, please.
Yes, we will actually have GNOME 41 in 2110. So people are constantly asking when we're going to get GNOME 40. GNOME 41 will be out in time, and we always aim to ship the latest version of GNOME in every Ubuntu release. We did not in the last release, simply because it was a very large change from the previous GNOME version. Those, not only UI changes, but GNOME extensions weren't all ported yet, things like that, to work with that version of GNOME. So we held off on shipping GNOME 40 just so everything could catch up. But we will always strive to ship the latest version of GNOME in each release. And that will definitely be the case for 2110.
Right. But it is a question that I hear and see a lot as well. So we're probably going to have to answer it in the next Indaba and the one after that. So other big changes in Ubuntu. Martin, there was a question submitted for you by an Alan Pope that asked when Mate was going to be the default desktop environment in.
Who is this guy?
I think you mean the Alan Pope, not an Alan Pope. I do believe Alan is trolling supremely. I think succinctly the answer is never. And let me give some inside baseball answers to this. I used to work at Canonical, and I had a hand in the desktop team. And over the years, obviously, my sort of, passion project being Mate Desktop and Ubuntu Mate, that came up a lot. So let me explain. Mate is great. It's very utilitarian. It gets out of the way. It gets the job done. But it doesn't have the finesse or quality that the GNOME Desktop has, which is what commercial customers care about. And so Mate is good for enthusiasts. You could say great for enthusiasts, but it is not commercially viable. It would require years of refinement to meet the quality that GNOME offers. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think the question everyone should be asking is, when does KDE Plasma replace GNOME Desktop? That's the more controversial question.
I'm not touching that one.
So moving on, Martin, do you want to talk, since you're already kind of on the Mate train, do you want to talk a little bit about what the differences are for the new users that maybe haven't used Mate and they're like, oh, this is the first time they're hearing of it. I don't know. Yeah.
I can answer that question. It requires the sort of the requirement of a time machine, because for some people that are new to all of this Linux desktop stuff, then all of this is history, and that's what the Mate desktop is. Mate desktop was forked from GNOME 2. We've just talked about GNOME 40, or succinctly GNOME 4, and Ubuntu has been shipping GNOME 3 for a while. And the Mate desktop is the continuation of sort of the desktop paradigm that GNOME 2 presented. So it's very much a retrospective desktop environment. And I say desktop environment because it is a desktop environment. It's a desktop paradigm, which GNOME Shell 3 or 4 is not. So, you know, it's very familiar for people coming from Windows or Mac OS. It looks and operates in a lot of the same ways. And that was where my interest in the project stemmed from. Around that time that GNOME 3 was emerging and Unity was emerging, my friends and family who I'd moved to Linux didn't want to change the behavior and the way in which they interacted with their desktop operating system. So having discovered Mate, I helped fix and improve it, so that those people that I'd moved to Linux could have this unchanging Neverland, you know, in order to continue to use their computers in the way that they were familiar with. And so I think the tagline for Ubuntu Mate from the very beginning was, you know, for a retrospective future. And that holds true today. It's very much a traditional retrospective desktop paradigm, but keeping track with all of the modern developments from the GNOME and GTK world in order to remain relevant in the modern day, even though it's established on design language from some time ago.
So then, kind of building on that, are you excited about some sort of core Mate thing? Is that going to happen? Like, because I mean, that's like, is there going to be a core desktop with a Mate, you know, desktop environment?
It's definitely possible, and we're close. But it would require a number of additional components within the Mate desktop environment itself become fully Wayland / Mir compatible in order for that to happen. And some of that work has happened. There's a lot more of that work to happen. I'd say core developer contributors to Mate probably numbers at around 4 or 5, and it's sort of evenings and weekends contributions. So when you look at the amount of sort of corporate sponsorship behind GNOME and KDE in order for them to get to sort of, you know, full Wayland compatibility, then we're on the trailing edge there. You know, it's going to take some time for that to land and be meaningful and robust.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's all kind of about delivering robust quality. Right. Very good. So never going to have Mate as the default replacement for GNOME.
Never. And I tell you what, if that day ever comes, I don't know which is the most expensive Indian restaurant in England, but I will take Alan Pope there and buy him the most expensive meal on the menu, because at that point I've won and he's welcome to his tacit victory as well.
It's always about the curry.
Yeah.
Always about the curry.
Yeah, and also probably check the date of that announcement. So if it's anytime in early April, just be careful.
Okay, great. Well, I would like to switch the focus a little bit and talk about security. So a question that I saw come through, which I had when I was new to Ubuntu as well, is where does Ubuntu compare with other major operating systems when it comes to security? I know that's a really big, broad, vague question. But I wonder, Ken, since you're such a veteran, and Martin too, like you've been around, so do you two have some insights from the, you know, years doing this that could kind of showcase like security specifics between the two? Like I tried looking on Fornix and I found, you know, benchmarks and stuff, but I couldn't really find like a good security comparison.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to quantify, right? Like what's the measure for security? I would like to say that, I think to me the most important thing is how quickly do security exploits get fixed, right? How quickly can you go from learning about an exploit to getting that fix out to users? And when you compare it to other operating systems outside of Linux, like Mac or Windows, there's absolutely no visibility. There's no transparency. You don't know what's in the works. Sure, even in the Linux world, we get many security issues that are embargoed. So our security team will learn about them from various, partners or whatever. And they don't want that information to be public until there's a fix out in the wild, because you don't want to advertise it for people to exploit, right? So there's things that are embargoed. But once we post these regular Ubuntu security notices, USN notices. So every CVE that gets published, that gets a fix, these are published on the website, on Ubuntu's website. You can find these very easily. We're very quick to get things out into the security pocket for Ubuntu. So package updates go out very quickly, and those are priority updates on the desktop and server systems. I think we do a great job at that sort of thing. Especially high and criticals. We have a great track record. I'm sure somebody collects metrics on that. I do not really follow those, but I think we do a great job with that. And we provide as much transparency as is possible. When things aren't embargoed, all of that information is public. There's Launchpad bugs highlighting the issue. They're often kernel. The more critical ones are kernel related. You can very easily find all those on Launchpad. Martin, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so anyone that isn't familiar with who I am, I did used to work for Canonical. So, this comes from a position of, having worked at Canonical. But in my current role, I care about container technology and orchestrating containers and the container lifecycle and container security. And just very recently, I'm gonna be deliberately vague, because some of this information is embargoed or was embargoed at the time, and I also don't want to embarrass projects. So there was a critical security vulnerability in a cryptographic library shipped by many distributions, and I became aware of this because Ubuntu patched that. Or at least released that patch ahead of the embargo date with a very cleverly described, changelog, as did Fedora and Red Hat. And consequently, if you're using containers based on those distributions, then you were automatically building and ingesting those security fixes ahead of day zero, the embargo date. Whereas other prominent distributions either chose they were never going to fix that issue because they're not corporately backed, they're volunteer led, and they were only care about the next release of their distribution, or they don't have the same size and scale of security team. So yes, they did deliver those patches, but it was like a month after the embargo date, so some considerable time later. So I could talk about metrics like from inside Canonical, but from the outside looking in, I see the immediate benefit of the attention to security that Canonical has with Ubuntu, because on the day that CVEs are announced to the public, you can be assured that Ubuntu carries the patches and fixes, has already delivered those patches and fixes to you, and you may not have already realized it, which is why you should leave unattended updates turned on, because you're getting the good stuff automatically.
Help us help you.
Please don't turn those off. It's important. And this actually, this comes back around to talking about snaps. talking about container technology, snaps already provide an extra layer of protection between applications you have installed on your system and other apps on your system, data on your system, things like that. But also, some people like it, some people don't like it, the automatic updates of snaps. If we push out a security fix in a snap, generally within hours, your system has that update. And many of these, this is one of the reasons why I will not run a web browser that's not packaged as a snap. I will not run Firefox as a deb on my system. I will not run Chromium as a deb on my system. Although we don't publish Chromium as a deb anymore, but I wouldn't. I only use snaps for browsers because your computer's exposed to every website you go to. I'm just not going to do it, even though they have their own built-in sandboxing and things like that. I like that extra level of security there. So I think delivering more and more apps as snaps helps improve the security story as well.
Can I just touch on that, because I feel like this is not talked about enough. Snaps and Flatpak are looking to address some of the same fundamental issues, which is improving the security and integrity, the repudiation of data for your system and your applications and the data that it uses. And this effort started like 5-6 years ago now. And I feel like it's kind of ahead of the curve. Those are capabilities that exist in those platforms that people aren't talking about because they don't really appreciate what they're bringing today. But I think in a couple of years from now, the work that's being done on those to provide contained, secure application with intent to the Linux desktop is going to be extremely powerful. And I would implore the Linux community to stop looking at these things as yet another way to package your software, but look at the advantages, the new direction that those formats are taking you in, and why they exist and why they care about what a lot of people in the sort of Linux enthusiast and the free and open source community care about, which is your privacy and security. If you just look at this as package management, you're kind of missing the point. It's profoundly more important than that. There is your information at stake by using these technologies, which dovetails completely with what Ken talks about with using a browser as a snap, because for this very reason, all of the browsers go grubbing around in all of the other browsers, settings, history, and what have you. But if you're using them as Flatpak and Snap, that can't happen. Browsers can't go snooping around inside other browsers. So you really need to be sort of thinking about modern day contemporary package delivery on Linux, providing you with better security and privacy foundations.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's There's a lot of reasons that Ubuntu is more secure than like Windows, and not just Ubuntu, but I think Linux in general. Just by having the code open source, there's not going to be backdoors put in, right? Also true. What if we look at so there was a question asked about security of debs. So the question was specifically around the packages in Universe. Are there any, what was exactly the question instead of going off the top of my head? How do packages not part of the main repo get security support, especially in LTS releases?
I can try to answer this. I don't really remember all the details, but there is now, for people that are familiar with ESM, Extended Security Maintenance, our security team provides security fixes for supported packages for an extended period of time after the LTS's support expires. There is, I think it's part of the same Ubuntu Advantage package where you can get ESM for Universe apps. I'm not sure how those are defined, about which ones they get support for, but I think customers can request for specific apps that are in Universe, and security will provide them fixes for those. But it's part of our ESM offering. There's probably a page on Ubuntu.com somewhere that outlines how all that works. But there is a way to get security fixes for Universe packages.
Very cool. Very cool. That's good to know, because the Universe is so useful. Are there, let's see. Right. Does Ubuntu follow upstream from Debian for any of those Universe packages? I think so, right? Like all of the stuff from Universe comes from Debian.
Well, so that varies, right? It really depends on who the maintainers are for the packages. We always try to sync packages from Debian wherever possible. We want to stay in sync, right? So we will sync packages. Now, SRUs for older releases, we're generally not going to just sync packages because Debian doesn't backport fixes the same way we do, right? So we'll cherry pick specific fixes that we want to fix bugs usually and backport those. Sometimes we will follow like a minor release, like if the 1.8 series of a package shipped in Focal and there's a 1.8.1 that's a bug fix only release, we might try to sync that if it's possible from Debian. So we try to do that wherever possible. But again, that's going to vary because like the Universe packages aren't necessarily maintained by Canonical. So, Martin could be maintaining some of those. Like he is maintaining some of those. So different maintainers have a different level of engagement, right? How much time they spend on it, how quickly they are, or to push out updates, or even what series they want to target, right? Maybe they're only working on the current development release, like Impish packages, and they're not actually uploading SRUs to older ones. It's hard to say what you're going to get depending on who the packagers are. But I will say there are quite a few that are very diligent about maintaining all the supported series. Like for example, I'm going to call out Andrew Hazen. Awesome dude. He maintains the Flatpak and Portal packages in Ubuntu. And I sponsor those for him whenever he has updates. And he is great about preparing a point release for Focal, a point release for a Bionic that has bug fix releases. He'll do all the paperwork for the SRU, the testing, documenting it all. He does a great job of that kind of thing. So we have many, many package maintainers out there that do that level of work to make sure those things are reliable and fixes get up out there to users. But again, there might be other packages that have a much smaller user base where the maintainer really only worries about the current release. It's hard to say what you're going to get unless you actually do subscribe to the ESM service to get the security fixes for Universe packages. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Now, regarding security fixes that get pushed out in mass, what about, and I think we kind of talked a little bit, but to focus on the question about, what about when security updates break things? So the servers are updated at slightly different times. Normally, folks would set aside time to do maintenance, but I could see how that could cause problems in some sort of scalable solution.
I've responded in the chat on that. Let me try to address that. I mean, so some of these things, like that particular issue, isn't because it's a snap. There was an update issue when in a certain type of an environment, and really the packagers should be looking after that sort of thing. I would definitely recommend filing a bug, probably against the MAS snap, to make sure people are aware of that issue, and hopefully prevent that in the future. It's a bit off topic for desktop team though, obviously. I mean, we're talking about things like, Spotify, GNOME Calculator, Firefox, things like that has snaps. Making sure those things work. That's a very different beast than like MAS in your data center. But MAS should be reliably updated via snaps. So if there is an issue, please file bugs. Make sure people know about it. We definitely want to know those things, and the MAS teams. And there's a MAS forum. Go post it on Discourse. Maybe there's ways to get help there, and you should reach out and do that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, there was a comment kind of related to all of this that podcast Ubuntu Portugal brought up, that they said, going to actually just kind of show this. It would be cool if there was a greater effort in promoting that work for Universe across releases. And then the follow-up to that, maybe it would be a good way to get more people working on package maintenance. And I think this is definitely, it's maybe not, maintenance is never the most glamorous way of contributing to a project, but I think it's also one of the most important. And I think, I know that this is something that Reese and I have talked about, is trying to find ways to help encourage more contributions and more activity in the packaging, especially for Universe. And so definitely look for kind of more conversation and more kind of more calls to action for that happening in hopefully the near future. But I know that I can speak in the Ubuntu Mate project that Big Pod, who does our packaging, I've seen him just kind of go at it. And even if it's kind of a bit of a foreign concept at first, there are people who, and he's done some videos on this. And so there are people out there who are doing this. And I think having kind of more tutorials, I think this would make a great Ubuntu on Air for community office hours to kind of get that part of our contribution, our contributor kind of focus on just a bit more active would be really great.
Yeah. And if I might add to that, yes, you can contribute to Universe, and definitely that's something that I personally want to do more of, in support of the other Ubuntu flavors, for example. Some flavors and remixes which are still trying to establish themselves and need some assistance in actually getting packages into Universe in order to deliver the operating systems that they care about. So there is absolutely a fundamental requirement for Debian package maintenance and community contribution there. But comes back to the conversation about snaps. If you're delivering an application and it doesn't yet exist in the Debian or Ubuntu archive, then there's no good reason why it shouldn't be a snap. Now, when people hear the word snap, some will react with a negative instinct, and they probably don't understand why, because they've heard it or been told it that, snaps are bad or whatever.
Is that the snap reaction?
Very good.
No.
Very good.
I see what you did there.
But here's the thing. When we talk about desktop Linux, we know we are in a marginal audience. There is, a relatively small audience of desktop Linux users and enthusiasts. But where Linux dominates is in server and cloud. And that's as a result of sort of containers. The container ecosystem has spawned a multi-billion-dollar industry in the last few years. And Snaps and Flatpak leverage those container principles in order to deliver secure applications to the desktop. If you are resistant to those technologies, you are swimming against the tide. You are not going to be part of the winning team if you don't realize that this is the direction of travel that the industry decided years ago it's headed in, and it's also good for desktop. So, go and if you're a skeptic, that's fine, but go and educate yourself, go and learn about these contemporary software delivery platforms for Linux desktop, and make sure you're picking a side, in air quotes, for the right reasons.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, like I came from an academic science background, and there were always like rivaling experiments to find the same thing, right? And it was always a good thing. So I personally like having multiple container like technologies around. I think it's great.
Absolutely.
It only causes like improvements in all of them. Okay, so we are running out of time. 15 minutes. I had a couple of open discussion. We have so many great questions. Okay, here's a really good one. Is there a plan to create Yarrow theming for Qt applications? Right now, apps look too alien on Ubuntu, and I have heard that from Snaps as well. What are your thoughts on that, Ken? As far as like,
I think that came up when Frederick was on. I don't really remember though. It would really be up to the Yarrow team, or anybody could try to follow the Yarrow style and create a cute theme.
mm-hmm.
I think there was an answer online though with in the chat pointing to something that could do the same thing, but I'm not really familiar with cute theming, so I'm not really a good person to answer that.
Oh yeah, in chat, a name that I can't pronounce said that you can get the Yarrow styling for Qt-based apps throughout KV Yarrow. So maybe there's something that can at least alleviate some of that visual issue. Okay, so I would like to ask you all what in the history of your Ubuntu user experience, what is your favorite change to Ubuntu that has made you excited, that your mind instantly goes to, your favorite like feature change to Ubuntu? And I think Monica and I should go first because Martin and Ken have been around the longest, so you guys need more time to think about your answer.
Yeah, this is kind of an advantage since I've been using, I've only been using it for like 2 or 3 years. I think my favorite one was a pretty recent one, and I think that Martin will appreciate this, was when support for Raspberry Pi on the desktop came with Groovy Gorilla. And I went and got one of the Raspberry Pi 400s that came out, and installing Ubuntu Mate on that, and just there's times I occasionally forget it's not my main, much higher powered desktop. I'm like, this is kind of slow. And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm running this on a Raspberry Pi 4 tucked inside of this keyboard. And I think that was one of the most exciting things, not only as a user and knowing kind of who I could like give this to get them started, but also being part of it, like helping with the release notes as an Ubuntu Mate contributor. Again, Team Chelsea Cucumber for life. But that was, I think, one of my favorites, and I think I would definitely Reese would also be excited since he's our Raspberry Pi person, and it's so exciting, and I can't wait to see where we go in the future. So I think that was one of my favorite updates / changes.
That's cool. Yeah, I can't live without fractional scaling. I was so excited when that appeared. So excited. Because I refuse to have like a smart TV. I want like an Ubuntu attached to my TV. And I used to have to go and like change the scale of everything individually.
Oh no.
Fractional scaling is just, I heard angels singing. And then I met Marco, and I had to give him a hug and say, thank you for putting this in there. Okay, Ken, Martin, one of you.
I can't pick one. I've got several.
Go ahead, Martin.
So, thinking of Ubuntu as the project, my personal favorite was Ubuntu 15.04, which introduced Ubuntu Mate as an official flavor for the first time. That was of personal accomplishment, and I was very happy for that. Ubuntu as the whole, I think the most significant change was Warty Warthog, because up until that point, I'd been using several different, Linux distributions, and it was that very rough, first outing of Ubuntu way back then that brought me in. So I think sort of, the emergence of Ubuntu was probably the most significant change to Ubuntu for me.
That's nice. It's heartwarming. Ken, what's your favorite?
It's hard to narrow it down to just one, but honestly, I think maybe the Yarrow theme. I think
good choice.
I think
what I wanted to go with first.
I think the color palette is it's very pleasing, and it complements our default wallpaper. And prior to that, I feel like, I don't know, I used to like our default theme, but it aged, right? And when we switched to Yarrow, I remember it brought joy, and I've enjoyed the continuous improvements we've had to Yarrow as well. So I think it's been my favorite.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic nomination, and also because it's entirely community led.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it is in the shop window, so to speak. The Yarrow team are front and center. It's the first thing you see, experience, and interact with. So yes, a wise and notable choice.
Yep. And it's funny, we just had someone in the Twitch chat who is also one of our moderators who mostly helps keep the spammers out of our Twitch channel, asking if we want to buy followers. No. Asked if we would demod him because he only uses Linux as a desktop outside of WSL. And Martin, I think I see a book in the background there.
What is that book?
You do?
I do. How about that? Written by one Hayden Barnes.
Yes.
Yes.
Somebody that we all had the pleasure of working with, I believe. Yes, so that was his book. I pre-ordered it back in, I don't know, late 2020. Is that the right year? It's all a blur. There's
blur. It's all the same year.
Between 2019 good and halfway through 2021 okay, and there's this void of nastiness in the middle. But at some point, Hayden wrote that book, and I pre-ordered it, and it arrived this week. And yes, via WSL, Ubuntu. You can use Ubuntu on somebody else's desktop to great efficiency. So yeah, if you are in a Windows world, in a Windows ecosystem, then you can increase your productivity no end by exploiting some WSL in your life.
Yeah, and you can even run Ubuntu GUI apps now on WSL.
You can.
Well.
I mean, it's moving so fast.
Yeah,
I imagine Hayden had a horrible job keeping the final version of that up to date, with all of the changes that are happening all the time. I imagine there'll be a second edition of this in short order, accounting for all of that.
And for everybody's information, WSL is part of the Ubuntu Desktop team. So our WSL engineers are part of the desktop team, and maybe we can have some of those folks join us for an Indaba at some point to talk more about WSL.
I would really like that.
WSL is wildly popular and super useful. Brings Ubuntu everywhere.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I think a lot of really cool things have come to Ubuntu, and I got to say that as a Canonical employee, I'm pretty happy that everybody on the team legit loves their job, and they're actually, honestly, sincerely passionate about what they do. And so that's why you get these really cool features with high quality things like WSL and Hayden that went off and wrote a book about it and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love this
And
stuff.
Yep. And
Yeah.
there's, I think, a lot of people interested in doing some community-based learning around it. And so definitely if you're interested in that and you're watching this, kind of stay tuned, and hopefully we'll have some things soon. So it's really
cool.
exciting.
Yeah, great.
Oh, and we're getting some good people to invite too.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay, great.
Podcast Ubuntu Portugal. Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, Nuno. You should definitely get Nuno on. Nuno's brilliant.
Okay. I'll have to add that to the list. Start another like spreadsheet of potential folks.
All the spreadsheets.
Yeah, right.
But no, it's
Cool.
great. It just means, and I love how, and I think one of the things, I mean, slightly biased coming from the community team, but how not only we get these people at Canonical who are super passionate about what they do, but we have people in the volunteer community who are equally passionate about that. And we get to bring them together here to talk about the things that we both love. And it's just, like you said, this really isn't this, it's work, but it's, I think, one of the most enjoyable aspects of our jobs is to get to do these.
Definitely. Yeah. Interfacing with the community that helped make us what it is kind of where the sweet spot is, I think.
Exactly.
So, well, I think I'd like to wrap it on this end. There are a couple of questions that we didn't answer, but we can put those answers up later. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining us and asking questions. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come to the next one. The next one is the last Friday of August, which is
July.
July.
That's July 30th. Yeah, July 30th. So hope you all can make it. Same time, same channel.
Same
okay.
Ubuntu time, same Ubuntu channel.
Yeah, right.
Channels.
Channels. True.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, wonderful July, and we'll see you July 30th.
Yeah. And of course, Martin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so
It's
much. It was
my
really
pleasure. Thank
nice
you
to
for
see
inviting me
you
on.
again.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you all again.
I hope to see you in the chat next time too.
Always.
Yes.
Always
Yeah,
there.
of course.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, have a great weekend and see you all later.
Take care.